Are we live, Sean? Are we live? Hello and welcome to another Dragon Plus live stream. Today we have Sean Mayofsky in the studio, so I am frantically working the buttons in front of me, which I promised to do incorrectly, and with no, I know, with no small degree of user error. So, but we're back. Hello, we're back. I am your host, as always, Bart Carroll, and with me, as always, is Jeremy Crawford, the lead designer of the Player's Handbook and lead rules designer of Dungeons & Dragons.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, welcome. We were off next week in no small part because you were busy working on one of the things we're going to be talking about today, which is the most recent Unearthed Arcana.
That's right.
So we're going to be diving into Subclasses Part 2. We do have some of your questions that we've compiled from our last live stream, which we'll be tackling as well. If you do have questions for us this week, please do put it into chat. Please do preface it with question as always. And as we like to do, there is most likely a giveaway that we'll be running in chat as well, which is almost always invariably an unopened product that I have at my desk that I always say, well, it could sit here indefinitely.
Right.
Or I could give it out to folks that might actually be using it around their tables.
That sounds great. You thank it for the happiness it gave you,
Yes.
and then you send it to a good home.
It's true. There is something that joyful about just looking at a thing sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Ask me about my unopened action figures in my basement office. So that's proof positive.
I always open my action figures and my Funkos.
I will, if it's an especially good one, I'll have to buy two.
Wow.
One so that I can open and play with.
I didn't know this side of you.
Only with G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe has always been very near and dear to my heart.
Got it. That is fascinating.
As God is my witness, someday I would love to stat up G.I. Joe in the context of Dungeons & Dragons, so we'll see about that.
We should do this. I mean, just for like a game at the office.
Yes, yeah, exactly. See how it plays out, a little D20 modern-esque style of...
Ooh, see, now I want to do it, and especially if I get to play like the Baroness.
Oh, so you would take G.I. Joe into sort of the medieval fantasy world of Dungeons & Dragons?
Oh no, we could do modern.
Okay.
I mean, since we have firearms rules in the Dungeon Master's
Yes,
Guide.
that's true.
Which, notice there, everyone, how I just brought this back to D&D, and something you might not know about your Dungeon Master's Guide, that it includes firearms rules and even laser guns.
Yes, we talked about that last, 2 years ago now for the Extra Life material. Yes, laser guns are part of the official Dungeons & Dragons canon. So.
That's right. Going all the way back to first edition.
Oh, that's true, right?
The first edition Dungeon Master's Guide had firearms in it.
A little Boot Hill crossover
that's
from
right.
way back when.
And also a Gamma World crossover.
And I know some of the adventures, there was Temple of the Frog, had some weird laser gun-y rules, which were kind of cool to see.
Yeah.
Before we go on, my pointless question of the day, which I will promise to steer into Dungeons & Dragons in some capacity. Did you watch the Oscars, and did you support the Best Picture win for, spoiler, Parasite?
I love like in the same breath, you gave the spoiler warning and the spoiler.
Well, yeah, it's good. So you got to really turn off quickly if you're...
So I have seen the Oscars almost every year for decades now, but I did not watch them on Sunday night.
Yeah.
Particularly because I have been so busy that I missed most of the films nominated this year. But we decided as a household we're still going to have a movie-oriented night, and so we went out and saw Birds of Prey instead of watching the Oscars, and I loved it.
There you go. So you didn't see any of the Best Picture nominations this year?
I don't think I did. Wow. I really want to see 1917, and now that the movie you spoiled, Parasite, has won, I would like to see that as well.
I did see 1917. I thought it was quite excellent. I would have ranked that higher than Parasite, but that was just me, and I'm as I just said, a fan of G.I. Joe, so the war time movies are also appealing to me. But that was actually my question. I've been into 1917. I've been listening to Dan Carlin's Hardcore History on World War I as well, which is fascinating. Any advice as a dungeon master if you're interested in running sort of a mass battle type feel in a D&D game?
So I think if you take a mini-series like Band of Brothers or The Pacific, both about World War II, and look at what they do in those stories with the characters, which is they really zoom in on a group of characters, sometimes as small as a D&D party, and show what they were experiencing while this massive war was taking place around them. I often think that's actually the best place to put the focus in a D&D war story. Often people will say, and this again goes all the way back to first edition D&D, we want mass combat rules. One of the issues there, though, is that's honestly a different game and really takes the focus away from what D&D is all about, which is your characters.
Right.
Making meaningful choices at a sort of human scale, as opposed to the mass continental scale of a large war. And so I really love D&D war stories that are like Band of Brothers or The Pacific, where they zoom in and it's like, yes, this massive engagement is going on around you, but here's the difference your characters are making in the fantasy equivalent of like the Battle of the Bulge or in D-Day, or you could pick any like major World War II engagement, create a fantasy version of it, and then zoom in on your group of characters and like, all right, what are they experiencing? And really the dungeon that your characters could be going through might be a massive battlefield where the DM has planned different segments of it to be almost like encounter areas, and as you move your way through, you have to face different threats on that battlefield.
So not the mechanics of mass battle per se, but the backdrop of a mass battle could work quite well. World War II is interesting. I can see that with World War II, sort of the special missions, destroy the bridge or get through enemy lines or rescue a POW. World War I, I was thinking it might be a little bit more difficult because it's like, well, you're all in a trench, you're going to fight. But I was just listening to the podcast how at some point in the chalky ground of France, they would start tunneling at one another. So there's your ready-made dungeon right there. Hey, we've got some tunnels. It may or may not connect with the other sides, but we've lost contact with our miners. Can you go down and see what's afoot?
Did they dig too deep? Like what monsters are down there in addition to the foes you might be facing on the other side of the military engagement?
That's a good point. There's always the third party that adds a great deal of variety to any encounter.
Oh yeah, because D&D worlds are filled with creatures that they don't care about which what the sides in a war might represent. It's just that Umber Hulk is hungry.
Right. It's not looking at the uniform.
No.
It's just the tasty morsel inside of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's get to some of your questions from last time. And as always, we do compile them and try and get through as many as we can. We're going to be talking about Subclasses Part 2 today. We did have a couple on Part 1, specifically for the barbarian. Devere P. asked last time, how does Way of the Beast work with the extra attack?
I have to look it up. Because our printout is for Part 2. And so like,
neglected to bring you Part 1.
So maybe ask me the next question, because looking at the page, I think the next question is just about barbarians in general.
Yes, Cannonball Conry. Cannonball Conroy. Either way, Cannonballery is a great adjective or adverb for something. Was it intentional for reckless attack to only benefit the barbarian for their turn, and not the entire round, preventing advantage on reaction attacks?
That was intentional.
Okay.
For those of you who don't know, reckless attack gives you advantage on your first attack roll on your turn, and those words "on your turn" were indeed intentional. There are many places, not only in the player's handbook, but also in later books like Xanathar's Guide, and then also in Unearthed Arcana, where we lock different effects to a person's turn, and that's to avoid having the game get bogged down with a whole bunch of conditional effects being on other people's turns.
All right. Should I jump past the first barbarian question?
Oh no, I have part one.
Okay.
I have part one now on my screen.
How does Way of the Beast work with the extra attack? I'm going to emphasize a different word every time I ask the question. How does Way of Beast work with the extra attack?
So by Way of the Beast, I assume they mean Path of the Beast, and
Let's assume yes.
and I am guessing what they mean is how does the form of the beast, and now I'm going to have to purely guess, how does the form of the beast feature, which gives you a natural melee weapon, work with extra attack? Extra attack is a wonderfully generous class feature in that it lets you use really whatever weapon you want. Are you having mic troubles?
No, but Chad has mentioned that we're going to try and raise the levels a little bit. I was going to try and go extra vehicular spacewalk with my mic still attached, but I think Sean has me like strapped to the chair here.
It's going to turn out, everyone, that we're actually in one of the Saw films.
Right.
And Bart and I have been trapped
You
in
haven't
this
actually
room.
seen my right hand for this whole live stream.
I've been wondering what the Saw is doing underneath this table.
We will answer all questions. So I will be right back.
So extra attack lets you make, as the name implies, an extra attack when you take the attack action, and that extra attack doesn't specify which weapon you use, because you can use any weapon you want, or you can make an unarmed strike. So have at it, and that means that if a feature like the Path of the Beast gives you a natural melee weapon that you can now use to attack with, then you can use that not only with the attack action, but with your attack action enhanced by extra attack once you get the extra attack feature. Now, Bard is over there, unable to ask me a question, so I'm going to do something I think we've never done before on our show, and that is I'm going to ask myself one of your questions. Pixelence asked, any chance of a more elaborate skill system? So this is in reference to the skill system that's in the player's handbook. Now, the skill system that we developed in 5th edition, we developed listening to the playtest feedback we got during the D&D Next process. And our aim with it was to create a system that is as open-ended as possible. My partner is back. You didn't have to saw him off.
No.
Are our levels better?
I have no idea. I was afraid to start throwing switches wildly, so
So
I adjusted things ever so slightly. I don't know that I've adjusted the volume quite correctly, but apologies for this week.
Maybe chat will tell us.
Yes.
So the skill system is meant to be very, very flexible. We created it so that a DM and players could improvise very easily various things that they want to do with their skills. We could have gone in the direction of heavily specifying what you could do mechanically with every skill. But what we discovered is that tends to constrain people's imagination at the table, and we much rather the play pattern, and playtesters told us in large number in the D&D Next playtest, that they enjoy the play pattern of, here's what my character is going to do, and then the DM say, all right, that is a charisma persuasion check, or hey, now make an intelligence arcana check, or whatever the ability skill combo is that makes the most sense in those circumstances. The more prescriptive we get with our skill design, let's say we had put in, here are the exact things you can do with the arcana skill, that certainly gives more certainty at the table, But what it then does is it actually takes away the liberty that a lot of people have at the table to just describe whatever they want to do, and then the dungeon master weds their intended action to the most appropriate skill
Right.
and ability for that particular circumstance.
It says I can long jump and high jump, but I can't triple jump because it's not explicitly stated there.
Well, but
That's what you're trying to avoid.
right.
With,
Well, and because you'll notice that I love that you bring up the jumping rules. Jumping is actually not even built into any of our skills. The jumping rules are just a part of our general suite of movement rules.
Right.
And we've left it open-ended on how you might use skills like acrobatics and athletics to interact with those other rules. And again, that's very intentional.
Yes.
Our skill system is meant to invite all sorts of improv. It's meant to be enhanced with the DM applying advantage or disadvantage given particular circumstances. It is meant to be a big open door that says, come in here and just make up some wonderfully wild stuff.
See, you've caught my house rule because I do like to have characters roll athletics or acrobatics depending on what they want to do around the battlefield.
When they jump.
Yes. Well, jumping is usually the most benign movement they're trying to pull off because invariably my players are they're very swashbucklery, which is fantastic, and I love that.
And that's what those skills are for.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But again, we decided not to say, all right, swinging from a chandelier is a DC 13 check, whereas jumping from one tabletop to another is another check. Because at the end of the day, all we'd be doing is essentially limiting people's creativity. Instead, we want to say, here is a whole range of things you can do with this skill. Hey, DM, here's how you can determine the DC for these different things, and now go have a ball.
My questions. You've absconded with my questions. I think we're hearing that volume levels are exactly the same. So,
are we even audible?
Low. So if we're sounding a little bit low, please adjust your volume slightly.
All right.
So that was on the more elaborate skill system. I'm assuming that was the only one on there. Because I like this one. I like that one. Monsieur Loti asks, does the blinded condition assume the attacker is not blinded? In the context of, say, a fog cloud spell, everyone's blinded. And again, like going back to sort of the mass combat situations, there's a literal fog of war. If everyone's blinded and neither have blind sight, wouldn't the attack also be at disadvantage?
So first off, our conditions make no assumptions about other people. A condition does things to the person who's currently subjected to that condition. And so what you have to then do is, let's say you have two combatants who are blinded and they're fighting with each other. Well, you would apply the condition to both of them and then see how the rules play out. Because, like in this case, if you can't see, you have disadvantage on your attack rolls. But if you attack someone who can't see you, you have advantage on your attack rolls, which means it's canceled out and you just make attack rolls. And so that's the important thing to keep in mind. Any situation in the game where advantage and disadvantage apply at the same time to the same person, they cancel each other out. And this is true no matter how many instances of advantage or disadvantage might be piled on that person. So for instance, a person might be currently subjected to two conditions that impose disadvantage, say, on their roll, and they might be enjoying the benefit of one feature that gives them advantage on that roll. So even though it's one instance of advantage and two instances of disadvantage, still they're all canceled out. In essence, it doesn't actually matter how many things are applying disadvantage to you or how many things are applying advantage to you. However many there are of either of them, they cancel each other out. And then you just roll like normal.
I was looking up, it was reminded me, there was a book I had read a while ago. I think it was like The History of Duels. And it wasn't just about the 10 paces turn and fire. It was all the bizarre ways folks have dueled over the years. One of them pertained to a room where both combatants entered and all of the lights were extinguished. It was pitch dark. And there was like a knife on one end of the room and a poison snake also somewhere in the room. So the two combatants had to look around for the knife so that they could stab their opponent and win the duel. But they had to, there was also the chance that they were going to hit the poison snake.
Oh my gosh.
And somehow
if I knew the snake was in that room, I'd never go in there.
Well, they had agreed to these rules, the parameters, ahead of time. They had determined, like, hey, this is a fair way to have a duel.
No way.
So you're in the Indiana Jones camp of why did it have to be snakes?
Absolutely. I 100% on the same page as him.
All right. I'm on the rats side.
Okay, yes, I can take rats fine.
Oh, creepy and gross.
Okay. So, shall we jump to subclasses part 2?
Yes, let's do that. We're getting close to the bottom of the hour here, so let's spend a good amount of time when the remaining time we have left to take a look. This is the most recent Unearthed Arcana. This came out last week. This is Subclasses Part 2. Quick note, the survey for Subclasses Part 1 is also linked to from this article, so take a look for it on the Dungeons & Dragons website. And now this is the subclasses for the Bard, Cleric, and Sorcerer. So where shall we begin?
Let's start at the top.
So the Bard. The Bard offers the College of Creation.
Yes.
And what is that about?
All right, so College of Creation is all about tapping into what bards call the Song of Creation and using that magic to create little notes of potential. And by note here, I mean like a literal musical note that can hover around a person. And you can almost imagine it pinging and doing a little like note of music as it provides a little boost to whoever it is that note is orbiting around. But then as this bard levels up, they can also use this magic to actually bestow life on inanimate objects. Like you can animate objects to create a dancing item, and I would love it if people playing this has the item literally dance. And then the subclass culminates with the ability to just create things out of nothing. So use the same Song of Creation that bards believe was a part of the creation of the multiverse to just, cause big objects to come into being. And we give you pretty broad parameters for what it is you create. Like, I need a rowboat. You play your lute and poof, here's a rowboat.
Old MacDonald had a rowboat.
Yes, we point you to some of the equipment tables in the player's handbook for the many different examples of things you could create. You're not limited to the things on those tables. This bard, again, I just love imagining them singing things into existence. And so again, it's sort of this idea that it starts with like this note of potential life, turns into the ability to actually bestow this life on an inanimate object, and then culminates in taking that note and actually creating something. So to me, there's a sort of a fun narrative arc to the features of this subclass. I
was going to say, I mean, at first blush, there's a nice hint of whimsy to it. And then thinking about it a little bit further, it could go a little dark as well. I'm thinking of like The Sorcerer's Apprentice, or I know you're a fan of the movie Legend, where there's a great dancing item when he summons this dress into creation, and it starts
Yes.
dancing with the poor princess.
Yeah, so that I love that you bring up legend with that dark dress.
It was oddly enough, it was in my dream the other night. Tim Curry,
yeah.
coming through his little mirror entrance was in my dream.
That's an amazing scene.
Yes.
The movie Legend is worth watching if to only see that scene when the Lord of Darkness creates that beguiling dress.
Oh, I think there's a great amount. If you haven't seen Legend, it's very evocative and could be influential in a lot of D&D games. So.
Yeah, but also another great example of this type of thing in the Sword in the Stone. There's a point where Merlin is animating a bunch of like dishes and other things. All of these different story things out there were part of some of the inspiration for us creating this. Of again the bard, just imagine the bard singing, followed by the chair or the table dancing behind them.
Ah, now that's one I haven't seen in a while. But
We also, by the way, I've seen online some question about this. If like, did we truly mean for this to be possible? We purposefully made it possible to animate a large item so that, yes, indeed, the bard can ride on it. Because I love the idea of like the bard singing or sounding a note on their musical instrument, and like a statue of a horse animating and the bard climbing up on the statue and galloping around on it. And I think the bard as a class is a wonderful place to explore some whimsy, because bards are performers, and performance includes a whole range of emotions. So you can have bards that are about very serious epic tales and music, but you can also have bards that are about this sort of whimsical creation.
Sure. No, now it's reminded me another source for D&D games I would also recommend would be some of the Oz books, and
Yes.
they don't entirely hold up to time in some ways, the sensibility of the modern age. But some of the details are interesting. The sawhorse is one such thing that is that object that's just animated and used as a mount.
Yeah.
And I suppose if it's a sad song, then you end up with Eeyore. So
That's right.
all depends on what song you're particularly singing.
Or you could animate a 4-poster bed, and like in Bed Knobs and Broomsticks, you could gallop around on a bed.
What is a poster? Just the banister part of the pole?
Wow, that is a great question. I'm not sure which part is technically the poster.
I also G.I. Joe and etymology, two of my loves. So.
Also, just from a purely game mechanical standpoint, College of Creation is fun, I think, for how the Note of Potential feature gives you basically a fun kicker to your bardic inspiration. So it takes a part of the bard class, this bardic inspiration die, and allows you essentially to flavor it with a note of destruction, a note of protection, or a note of ingenuity. This is something we've enjoyed exploring in the last 6 months or so as we've been doing this series of Unearthed Arcana, where we've introduced a lot of new subclass options. So we've been having fun exploring things that take something your class already has and sprinkles some fun spice on it.
Sure. I'm told the posters are the corners of the bed. So.
Just the corner. All right.
I have to look this up. Shall we
Thank
move
you.
on?
Thank
Yes.
you in chat for informing us what the posters are in the 4-poster bed. 4-poster bed apparently is not a bed that it has posters like the ones behind us around it. I knew that.
No, what's
Telling a bad
terrifying
joke.
is at some point in history, it was so obvious, there was not even a question. And how quickly that moved. I was trying to explain to Quinn, one of the first jobs I had between semesters was delivering phone books that came out every year, and so you had to deliver phone books. He has no idea what a phone book is.
Right. Why would you need such a thing?
Right. What?
All the poor trees.
Yes. Well, yes. I'm glad we don't have them anymore. But I was like, oh yeah, you have no idea. You will never come across a phone book in your life. Shall we move on? And if we get through all three, we'll go back to some of the questions we haven't addressed yet.
Yes, yeah, because we can do a sort of a high-level flyover and then see if chat has questions about anything.
Sounds good. So for the cleric, we have the Unity domain. So what is that about?
So the Unity domain is, as again, we always hope our names express well what the subclass is about. It is about uniting people. And as we talk about in the flavor text, that is whether the union is because of friendship, a family connection, having a faith connection, a national connection. This domain is associated with the gods that bring people together. So this includes gods associated with civilization, gods associated with the forming of contracts, or gods associated with things like marriage or other family bonds. Again, those things that bring people together. And so because of that theme, the real heart of this subclass is the emboldening bond feature, where you pick two willing creatures, you create a magical bond between them, and while that bond exists, the two of them are more effective. Now, that increased effectiveness at first is expressed by having this D4 they get to roll whenever they make an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw. It's sort of like an amped up version of the Bless spell that these two people have. Now, it's important to see that we purposefully do not give this bond any sort of predetermined emotional content. This is a bond that's being created on the spot magically, that the people have said, yes, we're up for this. So these two people could just be casual friends, and this is just a magical expression of their friendship. It could be a sign of their camaraderie as members of the same adventuring party. This magical bond is not actually saying anything at all about what those two people feel about each other. They might even hate each other, but they're both like, but yes, because of the dangers that are before us, we have agreed to have this cleric create this connection between us, and we're going to be stronger for it, which is, all, again, goes back to the theme of this domain, which is all about uniting people, bringing them together.
It calls to mind for me right away, sort of in the Two Towers, where Gimli and Legolas, they're normally adversarial in personality, but here they are in the heat of combat. We're going to do this together. There's a little bit of camaraderie, certainly, and almost competition, but they're playing off of each other, and they've decided to play very closely with one another to get through this battle.
I love them as an example because they have such a warm rivalry. They're always competing with each other. But we know from and here I'm going to be a Lord of the Rings nerd for a moment, that if you have read the appendices of, do we have another sound problem?
No, as some folks in chat have pointed out, it sounded like we had a crackling fireplace over at our control board for a second, which was causing both of us to turn that way. There was a bit of static. It sounds like it was fixed. We'll keep an ear open for that as well. We need, this is why we need Pelham manning the controls as opposed to me just hitting buttons.
Indeed. But yeah, if you read the appendices of Return of the King, you find out that the bond between Legolas and Gimli was so strong that Gimli was allowed to go into the West with the elves.
Oh, wow.
And this is to be with Legolas. And this was like, Gimli was unique among the dwarves of being allowed to go into that far green country, which says a lot about where that bond goes between those two characters. But that whatever the two people feel, whatever they think of each other, when they are enjoying the benefits of the emboldening bond, going back to the Unity domain, that the power of this bond then increases as the cleric goes up in level. At 6th level, it can be used for the two of them to reduce damage that they're taking, and then with the enduring unity, you also get a power boost if the other member of the bond gets incapacitated in some way. You know, they're reduced to 0 hit points, and then suddenly you get amped up. Basically, you can't do that to my friend or my frenemy, or again, whatever the nature of your bond.
Right, that's my frenemy to beat up, not
that's
you.
right. Now, one of the other bits in this domain is the shared burden channel divinity. This, going again to this theme of we're all in this together, this allows the cleric, when some damage comes into your group, to everyone who's willing to can take some of that damage, and we purposefully have made this open-ended so that you get to divvy up the damage in whatever way the group wants. So, it could be that, Bob's character takes 20 damage, Barbara's character takes only 3. Like, you can calibrate this to, like, all right, who can take the most damage right now?
Now, does the group get to decide that democratically, or does the spellcaster get to decide that?
So that is really up to the table. And
yes.
Yeah, and because each creature has, they say, yep, I'm in for this, I'm up for it. And then the cleric basically says, all right, everyone, here's your share of the damage pie that's coming in.
Hey, we're sharing the spoils. We got to share in a little bit of the pain.
Yeah.
It's the only way to keep us all on our feet at the end of this.
It is a very potent channel divinity, so I'm looking forward to the playtest feedback on this, and we'll see, if we need to calibrate it a bit.
But I mean, there's certainly some very thematic moments that might come out. I mean, a dragon breath that suddenly washes over. It's targeting one member of the party, but if they're all in this together, it's going to be horrific, and they're going to go down quite a bit.
Yeah.
But if they're all sharing in that, to the dragon's surprise, everyone's a bit singed, but I was concentrating on this person, and they're still there.
Yeah.
There is a strength in the party.
But then you see some of the burn appearing on other people who might not even been in the area of the breath.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a very flavorful ability. The domain gets the potent spellcasting feature at 8th level. And this time around, we put in a rule tip in the domain's text, pointing out that a cleric domain always gets either divine strike or potent spellcasting. One reason that I had us put in this tip is, frankly, we were getting tired of people arguing about why a cleric got divine strike or potent spellcasting, because we didn't realize until a little while ago that a lot of people didn't notice that in the player's handbook, every domain gets either divine strike or potent spellcasting. It's not actually a special part of a subclass. What I mean by that is these are not features we design especially for each subclass. It's basically we look at each cleric subclass, and as we note in this rule tip, if it tends to be more of a weapon-using subclass, the way we've imagined it, we give it divine strike. Otherwise, we give it potent spellcasting.
And I think we talked about rule tips just in general last time, correct? That it's sort of itself a bit of playtesting to integrate a little bit of these reminders where they're pertinent and relevant to help ease some of the friction with rules lookup along the way.
And yeah, some of these, as we've shown in some of our recent books, we're even willing to have appear in print. But then there are others that are really just here for the playtesting process to try to kind of basically reduce some of the static in the playtest feedback, so that we don't have, again, a lot of people saying, why, what is potent spellcasting? And this is, again, a chance for us to just say, this is just a stock part of a cleric. But it is unusual in that clerics, unlike our other classes, have this stock piece that gets toggled one way or the other that is built into their subclasses rather than into the core class. And another rule tip, by the way, that I was this close to putting in the cleric, pardon me, and looking at the feedback online, I'm now wishing I had gone through with it, is I was going to put in a rule tip reminding people that when we create things like domain spell lists, or even spell lists for warlocks and others, we almost always limit ourselves to the spells in the player's handbook. I bring this up because a number of people have, pardon me, wondered, why isn't the ceremony spell on the Unity domains list? The only reason it's not there is because it's a Xanathar's Guide spell. If you have Xanathar's Guide and you want to cast ceremony, of course you can still cast it.
Sure.
Now, that said, even if ceremony was in the player's handbook, I'm not 100% sure that I would have included it on the Unity domain spell list, and here's why. Domain spell lists, their whole purpose is to give you a set of spells that you always have access to every single day. Like you, no matter what cleric spells you prepare, here is a list of spells that you can always access. You never have to bother preparing them.
These are your emergency camping supplies.
Exactly.
Augment your trip with other things, but you're going to need food, water, a tent.
And so even if ceremony were in the player's handbook, I would still question including it here, because how many adventuring days are you going to need to cast ceremony on? That's the question we have to ponder when we build these sorts of lists.
Sure. Again, apologies if our soundboard is going to catch fire momentarily. I hear the periodic crackle, so hopefully it's not too detrimental to folks. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. Our volume is a little lower, so I've asked everyone to turn up their volume slightly, augmented by the occasional crackle out of nowhere, which is probably deafening everyone. So.
I guess us being burned alive by the soundboard is a part of the Saw scenario that we're in.
Right, yes, there's a fire off camera that you can't see right now. It is slowly encroaching.
Which is why I was coughing. It's the smoke where I'm inhaling.
But you know what? For next time we get together, I think we're off next week, the various travels. But when we're back, I'll load up the chat with some extra raffle items as a recompense. Is that the correct term that I want to use? Are we done with the cleric? Because there's a question I'm dying to ask from chat.
Yes, let's do it.
This harkens back to the dancing item of the bard. This tickles me. Where are we? I.O. Duff had asked, if you transform an item into a dancing item, it has an intelligence of 4. Now, if you cast to detect thoughts on it or give it another way of communicating, does it remember the time before it was awakened? And does a mirror remember every person it's seen?
No. because before you animated it, it was not a creature.
It had no sort of, yes.
Yeah, it's a fun idea.
I love that idea, I.O. Duff.
But here's the thing, if you love the idea of object reading, there are magical options in the game for that. The Knowledge Cleric, that domain, the knowledge domain in the player's handbook, has the ability to read objects. And there are some other abilities in the game that allow you to, sort of see past events.
That's a great. It's a great idea, though. I like that idea. Using that magic item to ask a mirror, who have you seen? Who's come through this? That's good. It's great for a murder mystery style. All right, we've done the bard, we've done the cleric. We have one more we want to get through today, discussing, which is the sorcerer. This is Shelley's favorite class of all time. Mine is the warlock. She's a sorcerer. And the sorcerer gains the sorceress origin and the Clockwork soul. So what is all of this?
So the Clockwork soul sorcerer is a sorcerer who has been suffused with the magic of the realm of the Modrons, Mechanus, or some other, if you're in your setting you don't use Mechanus, some other realm of absolute lawfulness. And here, I don't mean just the English word, being lawful, following the rules.
Right.
I mean the D&D sense of lawful in our alignment ring. that informs how the outer planes are constructed.
This would be the outer plane of sage advice.
No, see
Jeremy Crawford is the.
in some ways, no, because I think there are inhabitants of Mechanus who would be driven insane by how much improvisation is part and parcel of Dungeons and Dragons. So any time I tell people to follow their bliss or make the decision that makes the most sense for their table, someone of Mechanus might be shaking.
You're sliding way too close to neutral, almost into chaos
Yes.
on that axis there.
Yeah, no, I would say in many ways the heart of D&D is much more around neutral good, where it is go for the happiness of your group,
Yeah.
and use whatever law or chaos you need for that good, for that ultimate good for your group.
I would like to believe that that has been a consistent thread of the game's DNA from going back to first edition. And I'm hopefully not making stuff out of whole cloth, but the opinions expressed in, say, the Dungeon Master's Guide seem to be, listen to your Dungeon Master. They are the arbiter of the rules of the game. However, they have carte blanche to tailor the rules to their table play.
To their table's enjoyment.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, there, going all the way back to first edition, have been DMs who forgot that it's about the group's enjoyment, focus only on I get to be the adjudicator and do it to their group's dismay or misery.
Right.
Please do not do that. That again, it is all about what's going to make your group have a great time. And so the Clockwork Soul
Yes.
is the sorcerer who is channeling the amazing power of this realm of clockwork beings, not only Modrons, but others. And for anyone who doesn't know what a Modron is, check them out in the Monster Manual.
Yes.
There's also a couple paintings, of them in the Dungeon Master's Guide. I often think of them, some of them, as almost like animate D&D polyhedral dice. Even though there are more shapes than the dice we use for D&D, but I often do imagine that's like, it's our dice given life.
Exactly. Go to dragonmag.com and look at our December issue. The amazing Mazmataz created a knit Modron for the cover of that as well. So, thus, they are among my beloved elements of the game.
Yeah, no, I have always loved them. So this sorcerer at first level gains access to a list of extra spells that are sort of keeping, they have the theme of protection or tidying up, the sorts of things that an orderly being would care about. Then we have this restore balance feature that is a fun little experiment that we have here in this Unearthed Arcana, and that is giving a person the ability when advantage or disadvantage come up to basically say, no advantage or disadvantage is going to intrude upon this roll. And that can be not only a roll that you are making, but a roll that someone else is making. So that you see that foe, and they're making an attack roll against you with advantage,
Yes.
you can say, Or your buddy is making a crucial roll, but unfortunately they have disadvantage on it, then you make that go away. Now, the key is, you don't get to choose which one that you're scrubbing away. You are making it so that the roll cannot be affected by either of them. So that also means, let's say a person is being simultaneously affected by advantage and disadvantage. This does not give you the ability to turn off one of those two and have the other one still active. No, you are basically restoring sort of baseline balance and making them both go away.
Clear the table.
Clear the table.
Just roll the die.
I bring this up because watch out. If you use this on your rogue buddy too often and your rogue was counting on that advantage for their sneak attack, you just made it so they can't sneak attack. Unless, of course, they are sneak attacking using one of the other methods that rogues have for using their sneak attack damage. So going to higher levels in this subclass, you also are able to, pardon me, it's that fire again. You are able to create a bulwark of law where you are able to people get these dice that they can use to reduce the amount of damage they take. We also give you the ability to go into this trance, and I'm skipping over that mostly because I'm excited to get to the 18th level feature, which is where you actually get to have Modrons show up. At 18th level, you get the Clockwork Cavalcade, and when we were working on this Unearthed Arcana, Ben Petrosor, Dan Dillon, and I could not help using the word cavalcade over and over again for a few days.
I circled it. There's two great words just in this alone. Speaking of etymology, I'm like, bulwark. It's a great word. Like, what's the and cavalcade?
Yeah,
has a great sort of just musical quality to it.
Yeah, so I was working the word cavalcade into sentences whenever I could. So this is where you get to summon up these either Modron spirits or some other lawful spirits to show up and basically clean the place up. And that is, you can heal people, you can repair damaged objects, and you can also scrub away spells that you would rather not be present on creatures and objects in this big 30-foot cube. And of course, since this has to do with Modrons, it had to be a cube.
So this is, I'm looking this up as well. I'm going to murder this word. It feels like a bit of like a denouement.
I think you mean a denouement.
Denouement. I knew I was going to murder that. Though clearly it says denouement. A denouement moment where it's like, all right, the battle is over, but half of the party is bleeding out over here. All of our resources are scattered to hell over here, and the windows of the orphanage have been smashed. Let's get this thing back in order now. Yep. Let's leave things in a good condition that we came in.
And it really is a wonderful image, because again, imagine like this place is trashed, and then the sorcerer, raises their hands, and all these Modrons show up, and they just put everything back where it should be.
It's very end of Cat in the Hat.
Yes.
Like,
yep.
This hit the fan for the last 2 hours. Love it or hate it, but Mom is about to walk back through that door. Let's go. Our beloved Sean Mayofsky is back. We've had a bit of a audio crackle on the soundboards.
And apparently our levels have been low.
You know what? The crackle only started when I went over there to try and fix the audio levels. Now, I'm not saying her directly.
That was you that set the soundboard on fire.
Why did I hit the button that said crackle? So there we go with the Sorcerer and the Clockwork Soul. It makes me want to play a Modron Sorcerer with the Clockwork Soul.
I like all three of these subclasses. They all have a sense of either whimsy, warmth, or both, because they are all about things coming alive or being restored, or people coming together to work towards some common purpose. And that was the very vague through line of this group of subclasses, even though, again, we design each of them individually.
Sure.
But sometimes we notice when we design groups of subclasses that sometimes there will be sort of a common theme that goes through them. We then occasionally have to go through and make sure we haven't used the exact same game mechanic in each one. So we also always want to make sure they're each distinctive, even if there are thematic threads that link them together.
Well, I think back to October, there was sort of a darker theme to some of the options that came out in Unearthed Arcana with the Vermin
Yes.
Ranger and all
with
of
the
that.
Swarmkeeper.
Swarmkeeper, yes.
Yeah.
Before we head out, speaking of Unearthed Arcana, Unsociability had asked from last time, hey, speaking of, is there a place to input ideas of things players would like as new Unearthed Arcana subclasses or abilities?
You are always welcome on Twitter to reach me, and my handle, Jeremy E. Crawford, is there on the screen. Just let me know anytime if there is something you would love to see in Unearthed Arcana.
Get ready for your Twitter feed to blow up.
That's right.
All right. Well, here we are. We're getting close to the top of 2 o'clock. So I will say that we've covered subclasses part 2, but I know there's been a lot more questions that have come in as we've been speaking. So we will collate and collect and go review these for our next time. Next week, we have a bit of a meeting, an internal meeting with distributors and whatnot. So we will not be live next week, but look for us again in a couple of weeks from now. I'll get a few more items into the raffle pool. I still have a nice unopened copy of the fantastic Art and Arcana book. So we'll make sure we give that away. This time it was a Rick and Morty box set.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yes. So yes, as always, thanks everyone for spending an hour out of your day with us. Thanks as always to our followers, subscribers, of course to our moderators as well. And thanks to Jeremy E. Crawford for joining us as always.
Always glad to be here. And we survived.
Yes.
We did not catch on fire, and we did not have to saw off any of our limbs to escape this room. At least not
worry.
yet.
to be determined. Who knows what happens when the camera goes off. All right, I am going to hit the button that says thanks for watching, and we'll see if it says thanks for watching.